guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Kelsey. I'm the creator of Bite Size Ancient History and I studied classics and then Egyptology. So I'm here to talk about everything relating to the ancient world. And specifically today, we are doing episode 2 of Kaos. And as we all know, I loved the last episode, so I cannot wait to get into this one. I'm going to be doing every episode, and because you have all asked, a little extra bonus one where I go down into the Easter eggs within each episode in minute detail. So don't forget to like and subscribe so that you don't miss out. Don't forget to also check me out on my other social media platforms like Instagram, where I'm doing a pretty fun series right now where I'm traveling around northern Italy and basically talking you through all of the ancient sites. And this one bit of hair is really annoying me, so I'm sorry if it's annoying you too. So before we get into it, let's do a brief little synopsis of this episode. And it goes without saying, spoiler warning ahead, I'm going to be talking about the episode in detail, so you're going to get spoilers if you haven't seen it yet. So I recommend checking it out. If you're just here along for the ride for the video, welcome. Hopefully the synopsis will help you understand my breakdown. Also, as I say in every video, just because something isn't historically or mythologically accurate doesn't mean I don't like it. When it has been changed with a purpose and is serving a function within the story, I think it's a fantastic change. It would be boring if we were just watching and reading the original Greek myths. If you want to do that, there are original texts that we can go and read. And the whole point of mythology is that it is adapted creatively over time. Even when we look from the transition of ancient Greece to Rome, we see changes. Ovid, for example, massive changes. So who are we to say that you can and can't do something? So the episode starts with the character Caeneus, and we see him getting murdered in front of his mum, and then we flash forward by 10 years in the episode. And then we are back with our main character, Eurydice, or Riddy, and she is on the boat on the river Styx making her way down to the underworld. And we meet the characters Hades and Persephone. They talk her through the journey that she'll have to undergo in order to be reborn into the mortal world. And then Zeus is also on the phone to Hades to be like, I need you to create more divers. We're not sure why yet. And Hades is like, Persephone kind of interjects and is like, I don't want to do that, but then they finally agree to it. Then we flash back to Dionysus and Orpheus, and they're basically trying to break into the underworld. And Dionysus is helping Orpheus, saying that I have a way in which you can bring her back without dying. Turns out this way is taking him to a bar called the Cave, and this is his way in where he has to undergo basically trials in the form of almost like an X Factor style competition in order to be granted entrance. Zeus is then kind of realizing that his family hates him. He goes through calling all of his children like Apollo, Artemis and so on, and they're all rejecting him. But we find out he is also having many affairs on Earth with all of these mortal women, and Hera is not happy with this. She doesn't want any more half-born children. While on Earth having this affair, Zeus realizes that all the mortals seem pretty happy, which is making him unhappy. So he summons Prometheus back for advice, and thinking he can only really have power and control over the mortals if they're terrified of him. So he has a plan of killing half of the population. Back to Dionysus, he's taking part in the competition. So he's doing his trials in front of 3 judges called the Fates. And the first trial, he has to mark out every mole, freckle or pimple or whatever of the person who died, Eurydice. Second trial, he has to convince the judges that he should be the one chosen to go down into the underworld without using words. Luckily, Orpheus is a musician, so he whacks something out on the piano, which is very moving. However, the Fates reveal that he is not a good person. He actually stole the coin that was given to Eurydice, which grants her passage into the afterlife, which is why she is now stuck in the underworld, not being able to be reborn into the mortal realm. And it was kind of a douche move, I'm going to be completely honest. But they're not going to give up. So Dionysus and him go begging to the Fates, like, please, there must be another option. And the Fates agree if Dionysus gives them the watch that he's wearing, which is the one he previously stole from Zeus. And that's pretty much it for episode 2. So let's get into my debrief. So who is Caeneus? Really excited to tell you that this is actually a real figure from Greek mythology. However, I can't see any direct similarities with the show and the mythology yet, but I'll go into it. Maybe there's something I've missed and you guys pick up on, because that has happened quite a lot of times in my comments. You guys are impressive. The real Caeneus in Greek mythology was actually a woman originally called Caeneus. and she was a princess of the Lapiths. However, she caught the attention of the god Poseidon, and Poseidon, taken by her beauty, makes his moves unwillingly. There was no yes given with this. Very horrible. And in kind of a gesture of goodwill, after doing such a horrible thing, Poseidon is like, I can grant a wish for you. And they ask to be made into a man so that they don't have to undergo that trauma ever again in life. And that is when they become Caeneus. And a bonus gift that is given to them by Poseidon is that they are made invulnerable. They basically can't be really hurt or maimed by any weapons. Another important part of the mythology behind this character is that they appear in what is called a centaurmachy, so like centaur war. And this is a war that takes place between the centaurs and the Lapiths tribe. In this war, Caeneus is doing well, unsurprisingly, because invulnerable. However, this means that they have to turn to extra horrific methods in order to defeat them as a Lapith. They are crushed under a pile of trees and rocks. Not a good way to go. But there is no part of the mythology that we have that suggests they were ever stuck in the underworld or that they were murdered by a group of people in front of their mother. So there isn't a lot of similarity in the myth and the show. But it does mean that I can't really predict where their character is going, so that's pretty exciting. Who is it that kills Caeneus in Kaos? So, I have a little bit of a theory that this group of people is going to be the Furies, just because of the way they present themselves, and I think that would be a very cool depiction of the Furies as like this motorbike gang. But the idea that they're chasing down these people to like exact revenge or kill them kind of makes sense. So, we will find out in my review of the next episode, hopefully. Might take a while to come back to it, if my theory is right. But I think it could be good. Comment your theories down below. No spoilers for future episodes in the comments of this video, because that would just be mean if we were watching it along at the same time. In the video that Eurydice and the other dead people on the boat to the River Styx see, we meet the character of Hades as he's talking them through what their journey to the afterlife is going to look like. And he's played by the guy who played Lupin in Harry Potter, which is very exciting for me. Just saying, one of my favourite characters from the books. So very good. So they describe him as King of Death, I think, and then like a little asterisk being like, oh, with a guilty conscience. And I think this can be explained by the fact that despite being the god of the underworld, he didn't choose that. And just because he's associated with death doesn't mean he necessarily likes it. He has to support this idea of order and balance and control the fact that inevitably people have to die and that there is going to be this cycle. And the only reason that he actually ends up being the king of death or the king of the underworld is because him and his brothers, Zeus and Poseidon, drew lots on who would take dominion over the different mortal realms when they defeated the Titans, which is when Zeus became king of the gods. And he just drew the lot of the underworld, whereas Poseidon got the sea and Zeus got the earth. He didn't have this evil mastermind plan where he wanted to torture people or anything that you kind of get in this Christian idea. So yeah, he's not a bad guy. If anything, he's just very like orderly and probably having a bit of a rubbish time down there because he doesn't enjoy making people suffer. And alongside him, we meet the character of Persephone, another real character from Greek mythology. She is described as the queen of the underworld, aka his wife. And this is pretty accurate. So the myth goes that basically Hades caught a liking to Persephone, as seems to be a recurring theme when I talk about all of the background of the different gods. Anyway, he finds her when she's picking flowers in a field and kidnaps her and takes her down to the underworld. However, her mother, Demeter, who is the goddess of basically the natural world, like health and fertility, is pretty unhappy that her daughter has been kidnapped. She really goes into a period of mourning where she ignores all of her duties towards nature and basically lets the world die around her. And Zeus kind of sees this and he's like, this is not really supporting the natural order of the world. You must return her because things are dying, people are dying. However, before she is returned, Persephone eats the seeds of a pomegranate. Specifically, I think it's 6 seeds, so 6 months of the year. And that means she has to return to the underworld for 6 months of the year. Hence, for 6 months, Demeter is unhappy and we get autumn and winter when things are dying and barren. And then when she is returned, we have spring and summer where everything comes to life again. However, there is purposely ambiguity in this myth whether she was abducted against her will or whether she actually wanted to go and spend time with him. And in Kaos, we see it obviously leaning more towards the idea that she did love Hades and like spending time with him. Maybe it's Stockholm Syndrome, who knows? But there are a lot of retellings that you'll see out there that kind of focus on this aspect of the myth. And I like the way they've depicted them in the TV show. I think it's an interesting dynamic because they're usually shown to be these like very like young, like very like, oh my god, hot kind of like couple. To see them in their older age like the other gods, it's creating a different dynamic. And it's kind of funny that we see more of this like admin heavy side of the underworld, because it would be having to make all these decisions. It's not fun and sexy, so I kind of like it. One bit which I find is kind of interesting, and I get why they had to do it maybe for like the ongoing plot, but it's just so wildly not accurate to Greek religion and mythology, is the idea that you had to worship the gods in order to progress to a proper afterlife, because this just wasn't the case. The ancient Greeks viewed death as an inevitability. You didn't have to gain the right. When you made your way down there, you would have a form of moral judgment, and there were basically 3 different lands that you could end up in depending on your moral actions on Earth, not how you worshipped the gods. And these 3 different lands were the Elysian Fields, which is where like the most amazing like heroes of your time went. The Asphodel Meadows, so these are your basic run-of-the-mill people, and Tartarus, which is where the bad people would go. So in the show, you do see them, once they initially get off the boat, they end up in the place called Asphodel. So that's pretty accurate. It's like a, well, not accurate, but it's like a good interpretation of it, is that it kind of makes sense that the first place you would land would be the average place, and then they decide. In the show, they also then mention the river Lethe, or they call it Leith, I think, but I've always been told Lethe. Correct me if I'm wrong. And this again is from Greek mythology. This was also known as like the river of forgetfulness. Basically, you would drink from the river and you would forget everything from your life. And depending on the myth, some of this was so that you could live a very happy life in the afterlife, free from the burdens of the emotions of your previous living. Or it kind of does dabble in this idea of reincarnation. You will go on to another life having forgot your previous, which is what the show is leaning towards. So there is backing for that, which is pretty cool. But there wasn't this idea of the frame that you have to pass through that they just added. I don't know why, actually. That one's a bit of a random one, because they have the river that's right. I don't know why we needed a frame, but there's probably some. Maybe a place, I don't know. Maybe there's something later on that explains it, but I can't see it yet. Once they also dock the boat, we meet the character of Charon, who's there almost like this border control scenario to judge who can pass through or not, and this is based on whether they've been given a coin in their mouth when they've had their funeral rites. I mentioned Charon in my last episode, I'm pretty sure, so I'm not going to go into loads of detail, but very cool to see that he's making an appearance, and this kind of role makes sense for him. Very, very cool, cute reference as well is all of the dogs having 3 heads. And this was the very real guardian of the underworld, was a dog called Cerberus with 3 heads. Similar to, actually, not to go back to Harry Potter, but Fluffy in Harry Potter has 3 heads like Cerberus. So we love that as a reference. But there weren't multiple actual dog-sized ones. But because we're playing out this border control scenario with it, it makes sense, so I'm not angry about it. I think it's a very good creative decision. And Caeneus' dog is called Photis, and he tells us this is the word for light. Yes, it does mean light in the ancient Greek. So just a very cool addition. Maybe there'll be something significant about the fact that the dog is called Light later to come, because I feel like it's a weird thing to highlight if not. But yeah, love that. Alongside Charon, we also meet Medusa, who, unsurprisingly you'll probably know, is a real figure from Greek mythology. And I'll break down her story, but she doesn't really have a distinct role in the underworld as we see in the show. But I think there is kind of justification for why she appears here. So, if you don't know, Medusa was actually originally a normal mortal woman. She was a standard priestess in the ancient Greek world. And unfortunately, again, Poseidon actually takes a liking to Medusa. This is a lot for one episode with Poseidon. Anyway, takes a liking to Medusa and does his usual thing of, without consent, doing his thing. Unfortunately, the princess, this all happens in Athena's temple, and weirdly, Athena is angry about it, but not at Poseidon. She takes her anger out on Medusa and turns her into a creature called the Gorgon, which is a monster. It's got her hair becomes snakes, and if you make eye contact, then you will be turned into stone. And they do mention this in the show. Interesting, obviously, the fact that they're dead, so they can't be turned into stone, but they do talk about it. Then, unfortunately, she meets her demise when a Greek hero called Perseus is sent on a quest. And basically, the people that send him on this quest are trying to get rid of him, so they send him on these ridiculous things thinking that he won't be able to come back from them. And one of them is to fetch the head of Medusa. Unfortunately, he does succeed in this. How? He receives help from the gods. So Athena gives him a reflective shield, while Hermes gives him little shoes with wings, a very Hermes style. And Hades gives him a helmet of invisibility. This allows him to sneak up on Medusa without her being able to see him, and then him being turned into stone. So he's able to kill her and behead her. As a result, in Greek mythology generally, Medusa's head has become synonymous with this idea of protection, because it becomes something that he uses to fight other people. So, why do I think she appears in this episode in the underworld? 1, she is dead. And 2, she's acting on this border control scheme, so it's coming in with this idea of protection, if that makes sense. It might be too out there, but it's the only explanation I can think of. Then, Orpheus and Dionysus go to a bar called the Cave, where they have to compete for the right to enter the underworld. And there isn't like an exact place called the Cave in Greek mythology that was the entrance. However, generally, as an opening, it is considered one of these liminal spaces where you could leave one realm and enter the next. It is also where Persephone was abducted by Hades and taken to the underworld, so it could be a reference to that. Interestingly, in these competitions, you actually see a leaderboard and it mentions Electra, Jason, and Helen. Yes, these are all real characters from Greek mythology, however, none of them have actually tried to go down to the underworld. But all of their stories do feature this idea and the importance of death and facing near death. So that could be why. As a little bit of a brief summary, Electra you'll find in plays by Euripides and Sophocles, and she really is focused on the idea of revenge and murder, because her own father, Agamemnon, is murdered by her mother, Clytemnestra, and she kills her mother as revenge with the help of her brother, Orestes, if you're following me. Then Jason and the Argonauts have this challenge where they have to find the Golden Fleece, and they get help from Medea, and this is another life challenge, like a life-threatening pursuit. Then finally, Helen is the wife of Menelaus, who was kidnapped by Paris in the Trojan War, which, well, not in the Trojan War, it's what started the Trojan War, which has a lot of death, unsurprisingly, as a war. Then, when Zeus is making all the phone calls to his children, these are all his actual children. This is very accurate. So I think he mentions Ares, Athena, Hermes, Artemis, who is my favourite goddess, by the way, in case you were interested. She's like the goddess of the hunt and like the forest in nature. Very cool. I think that's all of them that they mention. Let me check. Forgot Aphrodite. Also Aphrodite. So this is very accurate. They don't have like specific reasons to hate Zeus, but in the same way that the show kind of tells us he's just not a great guy, and they're kind of aware of that. Feeding into him not being a good guy, as I mentioned in my previous video, yes, he did have a lot of affairs with other women. I think I said before, I was like, I wonder if they're going to show that, because they kind of showed him being more dedicated as a husband. Yes, they did show it. We did witness it. We see Hera disguising actually as Zeus to have one of these affairs, which, while we don't have a direct example of, there are a lot of occasions where we have this idea of transformation and disguise in order to perform these acts. And we have a lot of examples, as I said in my previous video, where Hera is getting revenge on these mortal women once they have had this affair with Zeus. While there isn't examples of Hera disguising as Zeus to have an affair, we do have her disguising as Zeus to trick people. So an example of this would be with the queen Leto. So Hera is jealous once Leto has had an affair with Zeus, and she runs away to the island of Delos, where she can give birth to her two twins, which are Apollo and Artemis, as we said, are his children. But basically, Hera disguises herself as Zeus in order to trick the other gods into not offering Leto protection. While she doesn't make it go by very quickly for Leto, as we see in the show, she does really torture her and make sure it is as painful as possible. Interestingly enough, she also did the same to Hercules' mum, which is pretty relevant because this idea of Hercules and the gift that he's given Zeus does keep appearing. As I said in my last video, there's only really one account where somebody is turned into a bee as punishment. So Hera doesn't have this massive bee farm of all of her enemies as we see in the show. However, I think it's a power move, and I kind of love the fact that they've made that decision because artistically it just looks fantastic, and it is very representative of this vengeful attitude that she really takes in life. And justified venge, kind of, because of Zeus. Probably shouldn't be taking it out on them though. When he is asking Prometheus for his opinion, we get these backstories about Zeus where it shows him having empathy. And one of them is that he gets bitten by an ant and then kills them all and goes to cry, and that his dad kills his dog called Hestia. No evidence of any of these. Hestia, however, is a real goddess. She is the goddess of the home and the hearth. Why is it a puppy called Hestia? I don't know, but at least it is a Greek name. There are some examples of Zeus showing empathy, but they're hard to find, and it's usually when he's like picked a favourite person or as a result of his own actions. So he shows empathy towards people when Hera is attacking them because he has caused the issue, as we've said before. In this conversation, he also mentions to Prometheus that he's going to try and kill half of the population, basically because they seem too happy and then aren't obeying him. And I do wonder if the show is going to continue to go down this road, because there is evidence in Greek mythology where, much like we know from the Bible, he sends a massive flood in order to destroy most of the population, actually more than half, and really just picks two people to survive, which are Deucalion and Pyrrha. And once survived, they have to repopulate the earth. So the show states that for people like Eurydice who are not buried with a coin in their mouth to pay Charon, you have to stay stuck there for 200 years. And this is accurate. You were forced to just wander along the banks of the river indefinitely. They've specifically said 200 years. I'm guessing there's going to be an important plot point tied to this, because generally it's just an indefinite period of time, but pretty good. In the Greek myth, did Orpheus actually steal Eurydice's coin? Because I was angry at this point. No, he didn't. There's no reference to him doing this. And there aren't competitions like this in order to enter the underworld. You have to face challenges once you get there, which I'll probably end up talking about in future videos, but there wasn't like an X Factor style competition. What they do kind of take inspiration from is this idea that when he was trying to get into the underworld, he encounters Charon and he's able to basically be let in without paying his fare because he starts to play his music and he likes it so much, which is what we kind of see in the show. But there isn't this hitch where it comes to him taking the coin and not being allowed down. Similarly to the fact that this watch doesn't exist. So we're going a bit off piste, but it's entertaining. Then it's the fates that basically judge who can get this chance to go down into the underworld. And the fates were real in Greek mythology, even if they didn't play this exact role. And it is the people that they mention. Firstly, there is Clotho, who creates the thread of life, which basically determines any mortal's fate. Then there is Lachesis, who determines the length of said string, so the length of your life. And finally, Atropis, who cuts the string to determine when you die. So they're not exactly like the passage to the underworld, but they are determining when you die. At this bar called the Cave, we also meet Polyphemus, who is a man with an eye patch, and I kind of love this as a reference because the real Polyphemus that we meet in Homer's Odyssey is a Cyclops, i.e. one eye, and he does live in a cave, so I kind of like that he runs this bar. It doesn't really serve a lot for the plot, but it's a very good nod towards real Greek mythology in a fun way. And that's pretty much everything for this episode. So don't forget to like and subscribe so that you don't miss out, and I will see you for the next episode. Bye!